Hello everybody, Andrew Field here. First video in about a month. There's a lot of news I need to cover, so let's get started. With President Biden, he gave an address to the United Nations recently about Russia's war in Ukraine and the recent escalations that have come with it, saying that Russia violated the UN Charter, and that he was also making a call to democracies to stand together against Russia. He announced a $1.2 billion aid package, which was a strong move to, not only speak with his words, but with action to support Ukraine still. After disgraced Russian leader Vladimir Putin claimed that Russia could use nuclear weapons against Ukraine. I agree with a lot of the experts after Putin said this, that this is not a blank threat from Putin. I think it definitely escalated the crisis a lot, the war between Ukraine and Russia, and I think it's something that needs to be taken seriously. There were pictures that came out about Russia moving possibly nuclear supplies, so yeah, um, we'll have to see what happens with that. I think the biggest reason it wouldn't turn nuclear, even though Russia is having setbacks, is because of the U.S., but we'll have to see. Russia also announced a mobilization of Russian troops, the first time they have mobilized troops since World War II. Um, Obviously, again, increasing the conflict. The latest numbers have been over 200,000 Russian troops um, will now be joining the fight against Ukraine. Um, the Russia created a sham election to try and give itself reasoning to annex 4 regions of Ukraine, just trying to make excuses to, claim Ukraine territory. It's ridiculous. Biden said the U.S. would be willing to expand the UN Security Council. That would be a big move because the UN Security Council, I believe, is there's only a few countries on the UN Security Council, so expanding that would lower Russia's power at the UN, because Russia would not be able to block things as easily, and I think it was a good idea. The U.S. also announced a new round of sanctions following the escalations from Russia. Russia also arrested over 900 people of anti-war protesters, just to give you an idea of how little rights people in Russia have. The protesters can face up to 15 years in jail for protesting war that they don't want to be involved in. It's sad how the state of affairs are in Russia right now. Mass numbers of draft-eligible men are fleeing Russia as well, not wanting to be a part of Putin's political fight. Russian forces have suffered heavy defeats lately from Ukraine's counteroffensive. Russian forces have pulled out of a couple big cities, one of them being Lyman, a key city in Ukraine's Donetsk region. And the counteroffensive is very positive, and it was surprising, but they'll have to be careful because with the mobilization of troops from Russia and the amount of troops that are going to be coming into Ukraine, I don't know if they'll be able to keep the counteroffensive up, but we'll just have to see with that, and I will keep you updated. In Italy recently had an election where far-right leader Giorgia Meloni won to become the Prime Minister of Italy. She has created the most right-wing government since World War II, and I believe the party that she stands for was a party created after Mussolini, from the party of Mussolini. So yeah, obviously this is a very bad sign for Europe and democracy at a crucial time where China and Russia and other authoritarian countries are influencing the world more and more. So I don't really think we can count. I haven't seen too much of what she's done so far because she's been newly elected, but since she's so far right, I feel like Europe can't really rely on Italy right now. Um, and also with Brazil, the outcome of the election hasn't been determined yet, but I think they're going to a second round because the president of Brazil and his opponent, neither of them got 50%, I saw, so I think they're doing another round to see if one of them will win. But that's a big deal because I think it's Bolsonaro. The president of Brazil was, like Trump, very against COVID, causing a lot of unnecessary death in COVID, and he's an authoritarian leader there, and I think he was calling the election rigged, so hopefully he gets defeated. I don't know too much about his opponent candidate, but I'm sure he's better than him. So we'll have to wait and see with that as well. Um, yeah. A couple hurricanes came that were very devastating. Hurricane Fiona hit Puerto Rico, where the island lost power, with 1.5 million people being without power for extended periods of time. A bridge installed by the National Guard after Hurricane Maria, a very, very costly hurricane that hit them in 2017, was destroyed by Hurricane Fiona. So Puerto Rico has just had to deal with another bad hurricane, unfortunately, and hopefully they will be able to recover quickly from that. Then Hurricane Fiona, after hitting Puerto Rico, went to Canada. Was one of the strongest storms to ever hit Canada. Also left 500,000 people without power in Canada. And again, hopefully, people in Canada who are affected by Hurricane Fiona can recover quickly. And then Hurricane Ian. This was, I believe, more deadly than Hurricane Fiona because it increased quickly in strength and it was near Category 5 when it landed in Florida. It caused massive damage and flooding all over the state of Florida. I think it went to the west coast and it actually traveled throughout the state, and it ended up dissipating after hitting the Carolinas. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis declared a state of emergency. 2.5 million Floridians were under evacuation orders. Fort Myers was an area that got hit really badly, I saw. Um, it also, Hurricane Ian hit Cuba as a Category 3 hurricane. Um, the death reports that I saw, at least from today, were that 3 people died in Cuba, 102 people died in Florida, and 4 people in North Carolina. So prayers to their families and people who knew them that are grieving during this time, along with all the people whose houses got destroyed and who've had to deal with the hurricane directly. Um, yeah, also a 6.9 magnitude earthquake caused major damage in southeastern Taiwan not too long ago, collapsing several bridges. And yeah, the photos speak for themselves. Also, in Iran, there's been major protests across the whole country following. Well, if you don't already know, Iran is very strict in terms of how women can dress, um, and are very strict in controlling a lot of aspects for women. It's very repressive there. And what happened was a 22-year-old named Mausa Amini was in the custody of mortality police because I think they were saying she didn't dress properly, and she actually died. I think they said of a heart attack. 22-year-old while being in the custody of the mortality police. So rightly so, many Iranians were frustrated by what had happened, and there have been demonstrations across the country. A lot of women risking their lives to protest their rights, which I think is very noble of them. Iranian Americans were demonstrating across the U.S. also to show their support, and hopefully, I don't know if it'll be possible because of how authoritarian and strict it is in Iran, but if they're able to, hopefully they're able to get some change out of it. Um, Texas had their first governor debate with Beto O'Rourke and Governor Greg Abbott. Governor Abbott refused to allow an audience at the debate, which is absolutely crazy. I mean, they had that with COVID being an excuse, but now to have no audience at a debate, a hotly contested debate in one of the biggest states in the country, it's crazy, but I think it's a good sign for Beto because it sounds like Abbott seems to be scared of wanting to hear criticism directly. And not saying that Beto has a great chance of winning in Texas because he already lost Abbott and Texas is very red. But I think it is a good sign still for Beto, and I really hope that Beto wins in November. In other news, Mexico filed $10 billion lawsuit against 8 different gun manufacturer companies that Mexico accused of making weapons that were favored by drug cartels. This was interesting, not covered in a lot of the major news outlets. I had to find it from, one of them, the news outlets that wasn't as prominent, but I think it's really interesting. I think it's a good approach by Mexico to try and hold the gun manufacturer companies accountable. I think the U.S. should try and do the same thing, putting profit before lives. And unfortunately, a federal judge dismissed the lawsuit, but they said that Mexico was vowing to appeal the decision, hoping that it'd go before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is very conservative, so I don't know how they'd rule, but nonetheless, if it did go to the Supreme Court, it'd be a very big decision with gun reform, and it have been a big impact not only with Mexico but probably in the U.S. as well. So yeah, hopefully it'll eventually go to the Supreme Court. Turkey, they just said this past month now Turkey's trade deficit is at $10 billion, which is a big problem. Biden recently said that the pandemic was over, um, which he was wrong to say. Obviously, COVID-19 isn't over. We are at a much better position with the vaccines and other treatments that have been readily available. And COVID-19 numbers are way down from where they were even in the beginning of the year. But the the reports are that between 350 to 500 people are still dying every day in the U.S. from COVID-19, which I agree is still too high. Along from the fact that now is flu season, so COVID-19 is definitely going to rise. It's not even a question. It will rise between a lot of people getting sicker, the weather turning cold in much of the U.S. and around the world. So please try and stay safe. Try not to put yourself in a situation where you're likely to get sick. The Voting Rights Act is being discussed by the Supreme Court about Alabama's congressional distributing plan that was put in place in 2020. And it's about suppressing African American votes because even though they make up over a quarter of the population in Alabama, in most of the districts with this plan, they don't really have a chance to have much of a say in the voting process, which is very racially segregated, and thankfully it is being discussed in the Supreme Court. But on the flip side, I am a bit worried that since the Supreme Court is so radicalized and so right-leaning, that they might actually side the wrong way and allow this to continue. But yeah, that will be a big decision nonetheless. Also, an appeals court is allowing the Justice Department to continue looking over classified documents in the Mar-a-Lago case. Also, Trump's lawyer refused to say that Trump returned all of the documents. And it's a very bad sign when your own lawyer is worried about getting himself caught by saying that Trump released all the documents. He doesn't even know. So hopefully they figure that out. And if he does have any more documents, they need to immediately be captured by the FBI. And also, on top of all of Donald Trump's other legal troubles, Donald Trump and his 3 children recently have been under a civil lawsuit by the New York Attorney General accused of business fraud, which of course they are guilty in committing. So that's all the news I have for you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.